Welcome to Café Tales. I'm Ali, your host for today's mystery. We're joining the brilliant Belgian detective Hercule Poirot in The Price of Silence. This story will take you into the prestigious halls of St. Catherine's Hospital, where beneath the veneer of medical excellence lies a web of deception, cover-ups, and murder. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from today. Let me know in the comments. Now, settle in with your favorite beverage, perhaps a cup of hot chocolate, as Poirot himself might enjoy, and prepare to exercise your own little gray cells. The Price of Silence. Chapter 1. An Unexpected Invitation. It was a crisp October morning when the letter arrived. Hercule Poirot, meticulously dressed as always in his impeccable suit with a pearl pin precisely centered in his tie, was enjoying his morning chocolate when his faithful valet, Georges, presented the day's correspondence. On a silver tray. "Thank you, Georges," said Poirot, carefully sorting through the small pile. Bills, an invitation to lecture at a criminology conference, a thank-you note from a grateful client. And then his fingers paused. An envelope of heavy cream stationery bore the embossed insignia of St. Catherine's Hospital. Captain Hastings, who was visiting London and staying with his old friend, looked up from his newspaper. "Anything interesting, Poirot?" "Perhaps, mon ami," replied the detective, opening the envelope with his silver letter opener. His eyes scanned the contents, one eyebrow raising slightly. "Most curious. It is from Dr. Elizabeth Winters, whom I assisted in a small matter some years ago. She requests my presence at St. Catherine's Hospital on what she describes as a matter of ethics that requires your particular discretion and insight." "A hospital case?" Hastings folded his newspaper. "Not your usual milieu, is it?" "No, indeed." The good doctor writes with some urgency. Poirot tapped the letter thoughtfully against his fingertips. "She has risen in her profession since our last encounter. Now she is deputy head of surgery at a most prestigious institution. Will you go?" "But of course. When a person of intelligence and integrity such as Dr. Winters speaks of ethical concerns, Poirot listens." He glanced at the letter again. "She suggests this very afternoon. Perhaps you would care to accompany me, Hastings. A drive to Hampshire might be pleasant." By early afternoon, Hastings was guiding his motor car through the winding country roads leading to the market town of Thornfield. St. Catherine's Hospital stood on a gentle rise at the edge of town, its Victorian main building flanked by newer wings of glass and steel. "Quite impressive," remarked Hastings as they approached the imposing entrance. "Private hospitals like this cater to the wealthy and well-connected, I suppose." "Indeed. St. Catherine's has a reputation for excellence and discretion." Poirot straightened his mustache with practiced precision before entering the building. The reception area was a study in understated luxury, with marble floors and oak paneling. The young woman at the desk directed them to the administrative wing, her smile professional, but her eyes betraying a certain tension. As they waited in a tastefully appointed anteroom, Hastings observed, "Everyone seems rather on edge, don't you think?" "Oui," Poirot agreed quietly. "The atmosphere. It is not tranquil as one might expect." The door opened, and a woman in her mid-40s with auburn hair carefully styled in a neat bob appeared. Her white coat was immaculate, her bearing confident, but her face showed signs of strain. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming so promptly." Her eyes flicked to Hastings. "And Captain Hastings, is it not? Please, come in." She led them into a spacious office with large windows overlooking manicured gardens. But rather than sitting behind the desk, she closed the door and turned to them with an expression of barely contained distress. "I find myself in a most difficult position, Monsieur Poirot. When I wrote to you this morning, I intended to discuss a matter of professional ethics that has troubled me greatly. But now—" She paused, pressing her lips together. "Madame?" prompted Poirot gently. "Yes, something terrible. Dr. Stephen Harris, our head of surgery, was found dead in his office 2 hours ago." Hastings let out a small exclamation of surprise, but Poirot merely narrowed his eyes. "The circumstances?" he inquired. He was alone, door locked from the inside. His assistant found him when she returned from lunch. There was— Dr. Winters hesitated. "There was an empty syringe beside him." "You suspect suicide?" asked Hastings. "That is what it appears to be. Or perhaps an accident. Doctors sometimes self-administer medications for headaches or other complaints." But a sharp knock interrupted her, and the door opened without waiting for a response. A tall, silver-haired man, with an authoritative presence, entered, his expression darkening at the sight of visitors. "Elizabeth, there you are! The board is assembling for an emergency meeting." His eyes assessed Poirot and Hastings. "I wasn't aware you had appointments scheduled. Dr. Montgomery, allow me to introduce Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. They are consultants I invited to discuss a hospital matter." "This is hardly the time for outside consultants," Dr. Montgomery said dismissively. "We have a situation that requires our immediate attention and absolute discretion. It is precisely because of the situation that I asked Monsieur Poirot to come," Dr. Winters replied, a note of steel entering her voice. "He is a detective of international repute." "A detective?" Dr. Montgomery's face flushed. "This is outrageous. Stephen's death was clearly a tragic accident, possibly self-inflicted. There is no need for— Perhaps it would be best if we— Discuss this privately, Dr. Montgomery," Dr. Winters interrupted firmly. "Would you gentlemen excuse us for a moment?" As Poirot and Hastings stepped into the corridor, the heated murmur of argument followed them. Hastings was about to comment when Poirot suddenly stiffened, his attention caught by a figure at the far end of the hallway. A man in the blue uniform of the maintenance staff was watching them intently. When he noticed Poirot's gaze, he quickly averted his eyes and slipped through a service door. "Most curious," Poirot murmured. "That man, he wears the uniform of maintenance staff, but his hands, Hastings. Did you observe his hands? They are not the hands of one who works with cleaning chemicals. And the way he looked at our good Dr. Winters, that was the look of recognition, mon ami. And perhaps of fear." Chapter 2. The Little Gray Cells Begin. To work following their encounter with Dr. Montgomery, Poirot and Hastings were granted reluctant permission to investigate the circumstances surrounding Dr. Harris's death. The hospital director made it abundantly clear that he considered their presence an unnecessary complication to what he repeatedly termed an unfortunate accident. "I cannot see why Elizabeth thought this required outside intervention," Dr. Montgomery said as he escorted them toward the surgical wing. "If Stephen did indeed take his own life, dragging the matter into the public eye serves no one." "And yet, the truth— it must be served, must it not?" Poirot replied mildly. "If there is nothing to discover, then your reputation remains unblemished. If there is something more, would you not prefer to know it before others do?" Dr. Montgomery's tightened jaw suggested he found this logic difficult to refute. The first interview was with Dr. Vivian Taylor, an ambitious surgeon whose precisely tailored clothes beneath her white coat spoke of both wealth and attention to detail. She sat rigidly across from them in the small conference room that had been grudgingly provided. Dr. Harris was brilliant, but impossible, she stated without preamble. Half the staff dreaded working with him, and the other half tolerated him, only because of what they could learn. She glanced at her watch. I'm scheduled for surgery in 40 minutes, so please be direct with your questions. You are being considered for his position, I understand? Poirot inquired. Something flickered in Dr. Taylor's eyes. The board meets next week to confirm my appointment as head of surgery. It was decided months ago. This changes nothing. Were you and Dr. Harris on good terms? We were colleagues, professional. He respected my skills, which, from him, was the highest compliment possible. She adjusted her sleeve. If you're implying I had anything to do with his death, you're wasting both our time. The next to be interviewed was Dr. Robert Palmer, a nervous young man who had served as Harris's protege. Unlike Taylor's cool demeanor, Palmer fidgeted constantly, his fingers tapping against his knee. He wasn't himself these past few weeks, Palmer confided. Dr. Harris was always demanding, but lately he seemed distracted, concerned about something. He shook his head. I asked him about it once. He simply said that old mistakes sometimes refuse to stay buried. A curious phrase, Poirot commented. Did he elaborate? No. And I didn't press. You didn't press Dr. Harris unless you wanted your career redirected to a small clinic in the countryside. Next came Ms. Barrow, the head nurse, whose starched uniform and clipped answers matched her rigid posture. I've worked at St. Catherine's for 23 years, she informed them. Dr. Harris was difficult but consistent. I respected that. You discovered the body, I believe, Hastings inquired. No, that was his secretary, Miss Collins. I was called afterward to confirm death, though it was quite obvious. Her tone suggested this had been an unnecessary formality. The syringe contained traces of potassium chloride. In the correct dose, it's used for certain cardiac conditions. In excess, it stops the heart almost instantly. Would Dr. Harris have had reason to self-administer such a substance? Asked Poirot. None whatsoever. He had no cardiac issues. Her lips thinned. If you're asking whether he killed himself, I couldn't say. He was arrogant, not depressed. But brilliant men often have complicated inner lives. With these initial interviews complete, Poirot requested to see Dr. Harris's office. The room was spacious and meticulously organized, with medical journals arranged by publication date and patient files in perfect alphabetical order. Observe, Hastings, Poirot murmured as he circled the large oak desk. Here was a man of precision and order, not unlike myself. Hastings smiled faintly. Though perhaps without your charming modesty, old friend. Poirot's careful examination revealed several points of interest. A calendar with a cryptic entry reading only J.P. Reconciliation. A torn photograph in the desk drawer showing a young woman whose face seemed vaguely familiar to Poirot, though he could not immediately place it. Most curiously, the realization that the office, though appearing immaculate, showed subtle signs of recent cleaning. This wood has been polished within the past day, Poirot observed, running a finger along the bookshelf. And yet not a single fingerprint on the telephone. Most strange for an office in daily use, is it not? Their final interview of the day was with Miss Collins, Dr. Harris's secretary, a pale young woman still visibly shaken by her discovery of the body. "He had no appointments that afternoon," she explained. "He told me to take an extended lunch, which was unusual. When I returned and found him," she twisted her handkerchief. "The door was locked from the inside. I had to call maintenance to open it." "The maintenance staff, they came quickly?" asked Poirot. "Yes. The new janitor, Mr. Peterson, I think. He opened it within minutes." "This Mr. Peterson, is he the gentleman of perhaps 35, with hands too refined for his occupation? Missy—" Collins looked surprised. "Why, yes. He started only a month ago. How did you know about his hands?" Later, reviewing the hospital's employee records with Dr. Winters's reluctant assistance, they discovered something peculiar. "The cleaning log," Poirot noted. "It shows no scheduled maintenance for Dr. Harris's office yesterday." "Perhaps it was an oversight in the record-keeping," suggested Dr. Winters, though her expression suggested she didn't believe it. As they left the hospital that evening, the autumn air had turned chilly. Hastings turned up his collar against the wind. "What do you make of it all, Poirot?" "Suicide seems the obvious answer, yet I sense you're not convinced." "The obvious answers, they frequently mislead, mon ami. Consider. A man of precise habits dies in a manner that, while appearing straightforward, contains several contradictions. His office is cleaned when no cleaning was scheduled. He dismisses his secretary for the afternoon, most unusual. And then there is this mysterious appointment with J.P., noted as a reconciliation. What required reconciling, I wonder? Their conversation was interrupted by the sight of two figures in the parking garage. The janitor they had noticed earlier engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion with Dr. Taylor. As they watched, the janitor made a sharp gesture and stormed away. Dr. Taylor remained motionless for a moment before noticing their approach. "Monsieur Poirot," she said with a forced smile, "I hope your investigations have been illuminating." "Most instructive, madame. I could not help but observe your conversation just now." The gentleman seemed quite agitated. "Just a disgruntled employee," she explained, closing her medical bag with a snap. "Nothing to concern yourself with, Monsieur Poirot." As they walked away, Hastings whispered, "Do you believe her?" Poirot's expression darkened. "What troubles me, mon ami Hastings, is not what the good doctor said, but what I glimpsed in her medical bag when she hastily closed it. A hospital access card with the name James Peterson. The very same initials as in our victim's calendar." Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. The following morning brought persistent autumn rain that drummed steadily against the windows of their modest hotel room. Poirot, ever meticulous, arranged his toiletries in perfect symmetry on the bathroom shelf before joining Hastings for breakfast. "I have been reflecting, mon ami," Poirot said as he precisely buttered a piece of toast, "on the most effective approach to our investigation. The hospital. It presents a facade of cooperation while revealing very little. Dr. Montgomery certainly seems eager to close the matter," Hastings agreed, pouring tea for them both. "And yet, Dr. Winters brought us here for a reason. I believe we must look beyond the present circumstances to understand what has occurred. In my experience, murders rarely exist in isolation. They are connected to events from the past." "Murder? You're convinced it wasn't suicide, then?" "The evidence suggests otherwise. Consider the locked door, a classic device to suggest suicide when it is not, and the cleaning of the office, most suspicious. No, Hastings, we must delve into Dr. Harris's past. His history at the hospital may reveal much. Their first visit. That morning was to the home of Mrs. Eleanor Bentley, a retired nurse who had worked at St. Catherine's for over 30 years before her retirement 2 years prior. She welcomed them into her neat cottage with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "I don't know what I can tell you that would help," she said, serving them tea in delicate china cups. "I left St. Catherine's before all this unpleasantness." "But you worked alongside Dr. Harris for many years, did you not?" Poirot inquired. "Nearly 20 years. A brilliant surgeon, though not everyone appreciated his directness." She hesitated. "Hospital politics can be quite vicious, you know. Doctors competing for funding, for recognition, for positions. Was Dr. Harris often involved in such conflicts?" Mrs. Bentley's hands trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. "There were incidents. Stephen Harris wasn't one to compromise, especially when he believed he was right, which was always." She smiled faintly. "But he was also protective of the hospital's reputation, perhaps too protective." "In what way, madame?" Poirot leaned forward slightly. The retired nurse glanced toward the window as if measuring her words. "There was a case, about 5 years ago. A young woman, early 20s. Routine spinal procedure that went catastrophically wrong. The patient was left paralyzed." "A tragic outcome," commented Hastings. "Yes, but what followed was equally troubling. The family was devastated, of course. They wanted answers. There was talk of an investigation, possibly legal action." She lowered her voice. "And then, suddenly, everything went quiet. The family signed confidentiality agreements, received a settlement. The whole matter was buried. This patient, do you recall her name?" asked Poirot. "Peterson. Caroline Peterson." Mrs. Bentley's expression softened with sympathy. "Such a lovely girl. Training to be a physiotherapist, ironically enough. Her whole life ahead of her." Poirot's eyes flickered with recognition. "Peterson," he repeated softly. The hospital administration was quite determined to keep the matter quiet. Dr. Montgomery personally oversaw the settlement. And Dr. Harris... She hesitated. "Well, he was never quite the same afterward. More withdrawn, more defensive. Some said the case affected him deeply." "Who performed this surgery, madame?" "Dr. Harris was the supervising surgeon. Dr. Taylor assisted. She was just establishing her reputation then." "The operation should have been straightforward?" No one could explain what went wrong. As they departed Mrs. Bentley's cottage, Poirot remained unusually silent, his mind clearly processing this new information. "JP," Hastings said suddenly. "James Peterson. Could he be related to this Caroline?" "Précisément, mon ami. The initials in the appointment book. They begin to make sense. And now we must determine why the hospital janitor, who is clearly not a career custodian, would have cause to meet with Dr. Harris, and why such a meeting would be labeled a reconciliation." Their afternoon found Hastings chatting amiably with the hospital receptionist, Miss Dawson, a friendly young woman with a fondness for conversation. Poirot had dispatched him on this mission while he himself examined hospital records with Dr. Winter's reluctant assistance. "Dreadful business about Dr. Harris," Miss Dawson confided, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Though between us, he wasn't well liked. Brilliant surgeon, terrible person, if you know what I mean." "I understand he could be difficult," Hastings agreed diplomatically. "That's putting it mildly." The stories I could tell. She lowered her voice further. The new janitor, Mr. Peterson, he had quite a heated exchange with Dr. Harris last week. I couldn't hear what was said, but Mr. Peterson looked absolutely livid. Peterson, he's relatively new here, isn't he? Started about a month ago. Overqualified, if you ask me. Has a chemistry degree, apparently. Mentioned it when we chatted once. She shrugged. The economy being what it is, I suppose people take what jobs they can get. When they reconvened, Poirot and Hastings compared their findings. The hospital records confirmed the case of Caroline Peterson, though the details were sparse, most having been sealed as part of the settlement agreement, Poirot summarized. A young woman paralyzed. A brother with a chemistry degree who appears 5 years later as a janitor in the same hospital. The connection becomes clearer, does it not? As evening approached, they returned to their hotel, both tired from a day of investigation. Hastings unlocked their door, then stopped abruptly. Poirot, he said quietly. Someone's been here? The room appeared untouched at first glance, but Poirot's trained eye immediately noted the subtle signs of intrusion. His toiletries previously, arranged with perfect symmetry, now showed minor misalignment. The papers on the small desk had been moved, perhaps searched. It appears our inquiries have made someone nervous, Hercule Poirot observed calmly. As he moved toward his bedside, he noticed something placed carefully on his pillow, a yellowed newspaper clipping. It featured a small article about a medical incident at St. Catherine's Hospital, with a photograph of a smiling young woman identified as Caroline Peterson. Across the article, written in red ink, were the words, "Some secrets are worth killing. 4. Go home, detective." Chapter 4. The Web of Silence. The threatening note left in their hotel room had the curious effect of strengthening Poirot's resolve rather than diminishing it. After reporting the intrusion to the local police, who seemed unimpressed by what they viewed as a minor incident, Poirot and Hastings discussed their next move over breakfast. "We must speak with this James Peterson directly," Poirot declared, dabbing his mustache carefully with his napkin. The connection, it becomes too strong to ignore. Finding Peterson proved simpler than expected. The hospital's maintenance schedule revealed he was assigned to the East Wing that morning. They discovered him methodically mopping the corridor outside the radiology department, his movements precise and economical, not the habitual motions of a career custodian. He glanced up as they approached, weariness immediately clouding his features. He was a man of perhaps 35 with intelligent eyes and the careful posture of someone containing strong emotion. "Mr. Peterson," Poirot began, "might we have a few minutes of your time? There is a matter of some importance we wish to discuss." Peterson glanced around, then nodded curtly. "Break room's empty," he said, leading them to a small staff room nearby. Once inside, he closed the door and faced them squarely. "You're investigating Dr. Harris's death," he said. It was a statement, not a question. Poirot inclined his head slightly. "Indeed, and I believe you may have insights that would prove valuable." Why would a janitor have insights into a surgeon's death? The defensive note in his voice was unmistakable. Perhaps because the janitor in question possesses a degree in chemistry and happens to share a surname with a former patient of Dr. Harris, one whose case ended most unhappily. Poirot's gaze was steady. "Caroline Peterson is your sister, is she not?" The silence that followed was profound. Peterson's shoulders sagged slightly, the facade of the anonymous hospital employee falling away. 5 years, he said finally, his voice tight. 5 years watching her struggle, watching her fight to regain even the smallest movements, watching her battle depression when she realized her career, her independence, all of it was gone. His hands clenched into fists. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer when those responsible simply continue with their lives? You secured employment here to investigate what truly happened to your sister? Poirot suggested gently. The settlement came with ironclad confidentiality agreements. We couldn't pursue legal action, couldn't even speak publicly about what happened. But they couldn't stop me from working here, from trying to understand what went wrong. His jaw tightened. Caroline deserved the truth. And did you confront Dr. Harris with this truth? The appointment in his calendar, JP, reconciliation, that was you? Yes. I finally gathered enough evidence to approach him directly. Medical records, witness statements from staff who've left the hospital. Peterson's expression darkened. I wanted him to admit what happened, to acknowledge the cover-up. And did he? Asked Hastings. Not at first. He was dismissive, arrogant. Exactly what I'd expected. Peterson shook his head slowly. But then something strange happened. As I presented my evidence, he changed. Became agitated, not with anger, but with what seemed like fear. He said something I didn't expect. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. No one was meant to be permanently harmed. Poirot leaned forward slightly. Most interesting? Did he elaborate? He started talking about making things right, about coming clean before... Peterson hesitated. Before she took over. He wouldn't say who she was, but he said she would never allow the truth to come out now, not when she's so close. And when you left him, he was alive? I swear it. Peterson's eyes flashed with sudden concern. I'm not a murderer, Monsieur Poirot. I wanted justice for Caroline, not revenge. I wanted the truth public, not buried with Harris. Poirot studied him carefully. What time did this meeting conclude? Around 3:30. I had to resume my duties. The head of maintenance is already suspicious about my breaks. After leaving Peterson, Poirot and Hastings made their way to the hospital archives, where Hastings had arranged to review the records of Caroline Peterson's surgery. Do you believe him? Hastings asked quietly as they walked. His account has the ring of truth, Poirot replied, and it aligns with the evidence. But there remains the question of who she might be. This person Dr. Harris feared would suppress the truth. The records department was presided over by a helpful but meticulous clerk who provided them with the available files. Most of the details of Caroline's case had indeed been sealed, but the surgical logs remained accessible. Look here, Poirot, Hastings said, indicating a page in the surgical record. Dr. Taylor was more than just assisting in the procedure. She seems to have performed a significant portion of it. And note who processed much of the paperwork surrounding the settlement. Poirot pointed to a series of signatures. Dr. Taylor's name appears frequently, unusual for someone who was merely assisting in the surgery. As they continued examining the documents, the pieces began to form a troubling pattern. Dr. Taylor had been deeply involved in both the surgery and its aftermath, yet her name had been minimized in the official accounts. Later that afternoon, as they walked through the hospital grounds discussing their findings, Hastings suddenly stopped. Poirot, I believe we're being watched. Poirot carefully adjusted his position to glance in the direction Hastings indicated. Through the reflection in a window, he observed a car parked across the street, inside which sat a figure observing them through the hospital gates. "Let us approach, but indirectly," Poirot murmured. They began walking toward the entrance as if departing the grounds. As they neared the gates, the car's engine suddenly roared to life. The vehicle pulled away from the curb with unexpected speed, but not before Hastings caught a glimpse of its details. "Hospital parking permit," he reported. "On the windshield." "Couldn't see the driver clearly." Poirot's response was interrupted by the ringing of his mobile phone. The screen displayed Dr. Winters's name. "Dr. Winters, how may I—" "Come quickly." Her voice was hushed, urgent. "I've found something in Harris's personal files about Caroline Peterson's case. I think I know who—" Her words ended in a sudden gasp, followed by the sound of breaking glass and a heavy thud. The call disconnected abruptly, leaving only silence. Chapter 5. A second. Crime Poirot and Hastings rushed back to the hospital, the urgency of Dr. Winters's interrupted call propelling them forward with unusual haste. The detective, typically so fastidious about maintaining his dignity, barely noticed when a passing car sent a spray of rainwater across his immaculate shoes. "The archives room," Poirot instructed as they entered the hospital. Dr. Winters mentioned Harris's personal files. They found the archives department in disarray. Papers were scattered across the floor, a fallen chair lay on its side, and beside an open filing cabinet, Dr. Elizabeth Winters lay motionless, a thin trickle of blood staining her temple. The overhead light fixture had been partially dislodged, with broken glass surrounding her still form. "Call for medical assistance, Hastings," Poirot commanded, kneeling carefully beside the unconscious doctor. He checked her pulse. Present, but weak. A swift assessment of the room revealed a scene of apparent accident, yet the detective's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Within minutes, the room filled with medical personnel. Dr. Taylor arrived among them, her expression shifting from professional concern to visible surprise at finding Poirot and Hastings present. "What happened?" she demanded, kneeling to examine Dr. Winters. "That, madame, is precisely what I intend to discover," Poirot replied, watching her closely. Dr. Winters was examining files related to a particular case when something, or someone, interrupted her most violently. Dr. Montgomery arrived moments later, his face flushed with agitation. "This is unacceptable," he declared, surveying the chaos. "First Harris, now this. What exactly was Dr. Winters doing in the archives?" "Pursuing the truth, I believe," Poirot answered calmly. "A commodity that appears dangerously scarce in this institution." As Dr. Winters was carefully transferred to a stretcher, Poirot scanned the scattered documents on the floor. Most were routine administrative papers, but a folder labeled Peterson C. lay empty beside the filing cabinet, its contents nowhere to be seen. After Dr. Winters had been taken to the intensive care unit, diagnosed with a severe concussion, the hospital director insisted on speaking with Poirot privately. "This has gone far enough," Dr. Montgomery said, his voice tightly controlled as they sat in his office. "Two serious incidents in as many days. The board is deeply concerned about the hospital's reputation. More concerned, it would seem, than about the health of your colleagues," Poirot observed. Montgomery's face reddened. "That's unfair. We're providing Dr. Winters with the best possible care. But we must also consider the broader implications. Patients are already asking questions. Donors are expressing concern. Perhaps they are right to be concerned. if violence stalks your corridors. Poirot leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Dr. Montgomery, what do you know about Caroline Peterson's case? The change in the director's demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. A momentary stiffening, a fleeting shadow across his features. An unfortunate surgical complication from some years ago. The matter was settled amicably. Was it indeed? I wonder. If Miss Peterson would characterize permanent paralysis as amicable, Poirot replied, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. Or if her brother shares your assessment. Her brother? Montgomery's surprise appeared genuine. He is currently employed as a janitor in your hospital, seeking answers that money could not provide. The director's face paled slightly. I had no idea. Our maintenance staff is hired through an external contractor. Through careful questioning, Poirot gradually extracted additional details about the Peterson case. While Dr. Montgomery remained guarded, his desire to protect the hospital led him to reveal more than he intended. The board determined that an extensive investigation would damage everyone involved, he explained. Dr. Harris accepted full responsibility as the supervising surgeon. The settlement was generous, more than generous. All parties signed confidentiality agreements. All parties except Caroline Peterson herself, Poirot noted. She was unable to sign, was she not, in her condition immediately following surgery? Montgomery shifted uncomfortably. Her family had power of attorney. And Dr. Taylor's role in this matter? She was merely an assistant during the procedure. Her involvement in the settlement was administrative. She helped process the paperwork. He glanced at his watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to prepare for. Dr. Taylor's promotion to head of surgery will proceed as scheduled tomorrow evening. We need stability now more than ever. Later that afternoon, Poirot arranged to speak with Ms. Barrow, the head nurse who had previously been so reticent. Finding her alone in the staff room, he approached with careful courtesy. Nurse Barrow, I believe you were present during Caroline Peterson's surgery 5 years ago? She glanced around before answering, her voice lowered. Yes, it was supposed to be routine. What went wrong? Precisely? Her lips tightened. I'm not at liberty to discuss specifics. A young woman's life was destroyed, Poirot said quietly. And now Dr. Harris is dead, and Dr. Winters lies unconscious. The price of silence grows ever higher. Something in his words seemed to reach her. After a long moment, she sighed heavily. It wasn't Dr. Harris who made the critical error. She said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was Dr. Taylor. She administered the wrong dosage of anesthetic, then attempted to correct it too quickly. Dr. Harris, as supervising surgeon, covered for her. He protected the hospital's reputation, and his own. And Dr. Taylor's career continued to flourish, Poirot observed. The hospital invested heavily in her training. She comes from a family with significant influence in medical circles. It was expedient to manage the situation quietly. As evening approached, Hastings returned from visiting James Peterson's modest apartment with additional information. The janitor had shown him photographs of his sister before the accident, a vibrant young woman with a bright future in physiotherapy. Poirot, Hastings said urgently as they walked through the hospital grounds. I've just had a troubling thought. If Dr. Taylor made the error and Dr. Harris covered it up, what happens if Harris suddenly developed a conscience? With Taylor's promotion about to be announced? Précisément, mon ami. The timing becomes most significant. Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of Poirot's phone. James Peterson's name appeared on the screen. His voice was tense and strained when Poirot answered. "I've received an anonymous note asking me to come to the hospital rooftop tonight, saying I'll learn the truth about what happened to Caroline. I think it's a trap, but I have to know." Despite Poirot's warnings to wait, Peterson insisted he was going immediately. As Poirot and Hastings rushed back toward the hospital, the darkening sky cast long shadows across the grounds. Rounding the corner of the east wing, they looked up just in time to see a figure falling from the rooftop, momentarily silhouetted against the moon before plummeting into the darkness below. Chapter 6. The truth emerges. For a horrifying moment, Poirot and Hastings stood frozen, watching the dark shape plummet toward the ground. But as it struck the pavement, the sound that followed was not the terrible impact of a human body, but rather the hollow thud of something inanimate. Hastings rushed forward to discover a medical training mannequin, the kind used to teach resuscitation techniques, shattered on the concrete. "A warning," Poirot said grimly, already moving toward the service entrance. "Come, Hastings. We must reach the roof immediately." The service stairs were dimly lit and seldom used. They climbed swiftly, Hastings leading the way with Poirot following, at a pace that belied his age. Emerging onto the rooftop, they found James Peterson standing alone by the parapet, visibly shaken but unharmed. "Mr. Peterson," Poirot called, "are you injured?" Peterson turned, his face pale in the moonlight. "No. I came up here and found no one. Just that dummy propped against the edge with a note pinned to it. Next time, it will be you." He passed a crumpled paper to Poirot. "Then someone pushed it over the edge. I couldn't see who. They were gone before I could turn around." Hastings surveyed the rooftop. "There's the service door we came through and the main access door on the other side. They could have escaped through either, or they may still be watching," Poirot observed quietly, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Let us continue this conversation elsewhere." They retreated to the security of Poirot's hotel room, where Peterson recounted his experience in full. The note had been specific, claiming to have evidence about Caroline's surgery that would change everything, and had directed him to come alone. "A trap, quite clearly," Poirot confirmed. "Someone wished to frighten you away, or worse." "But who?" Peterson asked. "Who benefits from keeping Caroline's case buried? Now Dr. Harris is already dead. That, mon ami, is the central question." Poirot paced the room with careful, measured steps. "We must approach this methodically. Dr. Harris concealed the truth about your sister's surgery. Now he is dead. Dr. Winters discovers something in his personal files and is attacked. You pursue answers and receive threats. It must be Dr. Taylor," Hastings suggested. "According to Nurse Barrow, she was the one who made the critical error." "Perhaps," Poirot stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "But there are aspects that remain unclear. We must apply pressure where it will be most effective." The following morning, Poirot requested a meeting with Dr. Montgomery, the director. The strain of recent events was evident in the shadows beneath his eyes and the tension in his posture. "I have been reflecting on our conversation regarding the Peterson case," Poirot began, "and I find myself troubled by certain inconsistencies in the hospital's official account." "I've told you all I can about that matter," Montgomery replied stiffly. "I wonder," said Poirot, leaning forward slightly, "what the board would make of the fact that Dr. Taylor, not Dr. Harris, was responsible for Miss Peterson's condition, or that this information was deliberately concealed during the settlement. Negotiations. The color drained from Montgomery's face. That's not... Nurse Barrow has confirmed it, monsieur. And I suspect Dr. Winters discovered documentation in Dr. Harris's personal files that would verify this account, documentation that has now mysteriously disappeared. The director stared at Poirot for a long moment before his shoulders sagged in defeat. It was a complicated situation. Dr. Taylor showed extraordinary promise. Her family has connections to our major donors. The hospital's future literally depended on their continued support. So a young woman's life was sacrificed. For financial expediency, Poirot observed. It wasn't like that, Montgomery protested weakly. Caroline received the best possible care after the incident. The settlement was exceptionally generous. Money cannot restore what was taken from her, Poirot replied. And now Dr. Harris has paid with his life. Tell me, when did he begin to die? Reconsider his role in this deception? Montgomery hesitated, then sighed heavily. About a month ago. He became troubled, said he couldn't continue with the charade, especially with Vivian's promotion approaching. He threatened to come forward with the full story. And how did Dr. Taylor respond to this threat? She was furious. Said he would destroy everything they'd built. Montgomery rubbed his temples. The board knew about Taylor's mistake, but we all agreed the cover-up was necessary at the time. Harris was well compensated for accepting responsibility. It was a business decision. As they left Montgomery's office, Hastings voiced what they were both thinking. If Harris was planning to confess before Taylor's promotion ceremony, that gives her a powerful motive for murder. In the early afternoon, Poirot received word that Dr. Winters had regained consciousness. They found her pale but alert, a bandage encircling her head. Her eyes widened at the sight of Poirot. "You must be careful," she whispered. "I found Harris's personal diary. He documented everything. His suspicions that Taylor deliberately sabotaged the surgery to silence a former classmate who could expose her past academic misconduct." Caroline Peterson was a former classmate of Dr. Taylor? Poirot asked sharply. Yes. Harris wrote that he only recently discovered the connection. Caroline had apparently threatened to expose something from their university days, something that would have destroyed Taylor's career before it began. And the diary? Gone. Someone took it when I was attacked. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. Harris was planning to reveal everything at Taylor's promotion ceremony. He said it was the only way to make amends. That evening, Poirot sat in contemplative silence in their hotel room, arranging and rearranging the facts in his mind. Hastings knew better than to interrupt when his friend was absorbed in thought. Finally, Poirot looked up, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a puzzle nearly solved. The board meeting to confirm Dr. Taylor's promotion is tomorrow evening, is it not? Yes, confirmed Hastings. Do you intend to present your findings then? It would be appropriate, would it not? But first, there is one piece of evidence we must locate. Poirot reached for the evening newspaper that Hastings had brought up from the lobby. Perhaps the society pages will provide some insight. Poirot suddenly went rigid, staring at a photograph on one of the inner pages. The image showed a much younger Dr. Taylor at a charity gala, and standing beside her, appearing quite familiar, was Caroline Peterson before her accident. Mon Dieu, breathed Poirot. They knew each other. The connection is not what we thought at all. Chapter 7. A gathering of suspects. Morning arrived with a clarity that matched Poirot's mood after a night of careful consideration. The Belgian Nycassats. Detective had arranged his facts with the same precision he applied to his mustache each morning. The photograph from the society pages had illuminated a connection that transformed their understanding of the case. "We must act swiftly, Hastings," Poirot announced as they finished breakfast. "Dr. Taylor's promotion ceremony is scheduled for this evening. I have requested Dr. Montgomery to arrange a meeting in the hospital boardroom at noon today." "Who will be attending?" Hastings inquired, folding his napkin neatly. "All those connected to our case. Dr. Montgomery, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Palmer, Nurse Barrow, and Mr. Peterson. I have also asked that arrangements be made for Dr. Winters to attend if her condition permits." "Do you intend to reveal everything? The A.I.? Truth has remained buried for too long, mon ami. The time has come for it to emerge into the light." Upon their arrival at St. Catherine's Hospital, they found the atmosphere unusually tense. Staff members spoke in hushed tones, and even the typically bustling corridors seemed subdued. Dr. Montgomery met them at the entrance to the boardroom, his expression revealing both resignation and apprehension. "Everyone you requested is here. Monsieur Poirot," he said, "though I must say this irregular proceeding comes at a most inopportune time. The board members will be arriving early this afternoon to prepare for tonight's ceremony." "I assure you, Doctor, this matter cannot wait," Poirot replied firmly. The boardroom presented an imposing setting with its oak-paneled walls and portraits of distinguished former hospital directors gazing down with painted solemnity. Around the polished table sat the assembled participants, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Dr. Winters occupied a wheelchair at one end, still pale but determined. James Peterson sat opposite her, clearly uncomfortable in these formal surroundings. Dr. Palmer fidgeted nervously, while Nurse Barrow maintained her characteristic rigid posture. Dr. Taylor, immaculately dressed as always, displayed an air of impatient superiority. "Thank you all for coming," Poirot began, standing at the head of the table. "The death of Dr. Stephen Harris has revealed a web of deception that extends back 5 years to the surgery that left Miss Caroline Peterson paralyzed. I fail to see why we need to revisit ancient history," Dr. Taylor interjected, "especially with an outsider present." She glanced dismissively toward James Peterson. "That ancient history, as you call it, madame, is precisely what led to Dr. Harris's death," Poirot replied calmly. "And Mr. Peterson has more right than most to hear the truth about what happened to his sister." Poirot began methodically laying out the facts. The surgical error that had been attributed to Dr. Harris, but was actually committed by Dr. Taylor. The hospital's decision to protect her promising career. The settlement that bought silence rather than justice. With each revelation, he observed the reactions around the table. Montgomery's resignation, Palmer's growing distress, and Taylor's carefully maintained composure that nevertheless showed signs of strain. "What you describe is certainly troubling," Dr. Taylor said when Poirot paused, "but it hardly constitutes a motive for murder. Dr. Harris agreed to the arrangement. He was generously compensated." "Indeed, madame. But recently something changed. Dr. Harris developed what one might call a crisis of conscience. He informed Dr. Montgomery of his intention to reveal the truth at your promotion ceremony." Poirot turned to face her directly. "That provided you with a powerful motive to silence him permanently." "This is absurd," Taylor said coldly. "You have no evidence linking me to Harris's death." "On the contrary," Poirot continued, When Mr. Peterson confronted Dr. Harris, the doctor expressed fear of someone he referred to only as she, someone who would never allow the truth to emerge now that she was so close to her promotion. Dr. Taylor's laugh held no humor. Circumstantial, at best, Monsieur Poirot. Is this why you've gathered us here, to present theories without substance? Not without substance, madame. There is also the matter of your prior acquaintance with Caroline Peterson, a fact you concealed from everyone. Our sudden silence fell over the room. Dr. Taylor's expression flickered momentarily before she regained control. I treat hundreds of patients. I can hardly be expected to remember each one personally. But Caroline Peterson was not just any patient, was she? Poirot retrieved a folded newspaper from his pocket and placed it on the table, open to the photograph, from the society pages. You knew her quite well before she came under your care. You were classmates at university. Dr. Montgomery leaned forward to examine the image. Is this true, Vivian? You never mentioned knowing the patient beforehand. A casual acquaintance at best, Taylor replied dismissively. It hardly seemed relevant. It became most relevant, Poirot countered, when Caroline recognized you during her pre-surgical consultation. According to Dr. Winters, who reviewed Dr. Harris's personal diary before it disappeared, Caroline threatened to expose something from your university days, something that would have destroyed your career before it began. Dr. Palmer, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke. Academic fraud, he said quietly. Harris mentioned it once after drinking too much at a conference. He said he had discovered that Taylor had cheated her way through medical school, plagiarized, research falsified results. He had proof but agreed to keep quiet as part of their arrangement. You pathetic little man, Taylor hissed. You know nothing. Harris discovered the connection between you and Caroline only recently, Poirot continued. He realized that the surgical error may not have been an error at all, but a deliberate attempt to silence someone who could expose your fraudulent past. Caroline's paralysis affected her speech as well, did it not? A convenient outcome for someone wishing to silence her. The implications of this statement hung heavily in the air. James Peterson's face had gone pale with shock and rage. You're suggesting she deliberately harmed my sister? He asked hoarsely. The evidence points in that direction, Poirot replied, gravely. Dr. Taylor rose to her feet, her composure finally cracking. This is slander. I won't sit here and listen to these outrageous accusations. Harris kept records, Dr. Winters said suddenly. Detailed notes about his suspicions, along with evidence of the academic fraud. That's what I found in his personal files before I was attacked. As the tension in the room reached its peak, the lights suddenly flickered and went out, plunging the windowless boardroom into darkness. There was a commotion of scraping chairs and startled exclamations. Someone cried out in pain. Emergency lights activated seconds later, casting an eerie glow across the room. Dr. Taylor was gone, and on the table lay an empty syringe. Chapter 8. The Price of Silence. No one touch anything, Poirot commanded as the emergency lights cast their pale glow across the boardroom. Hastings, secure the door. Dr. Montgomery, please alert security that Dr. Taylor must be found immediately. The syringe on the table was examined with care. Dr. Palmer leaned forward, his medical training overcoming his nervousness. Potassium chloride, he said grimly, the same substance that killed Harris. James Peterson had half risen from his chair. Where would she go? The hospital is huge. She has not departed. Of that I am certain, Poirot replied, an unusual urgency in his voice. Consider her psychology. A woman of precise planning and meticulous control does not flee without purpose. The archives, Dr. Winters said suddenly. If Harris kept evidence about her academic fraud, she would need to destroy any remaining documentation. Within moments, hospital security had been mobilized, with particular attention to the archives department. Poirot, however, seemed distracted by a different thought. Dr. Montgomery, he inquired, when documents are removed from the official archives, is there a record of their removal? Of course, everything is logged digitally. Then even if the physical documents are destroyed, evidence of their existence remains. Understanding dawned on Montgomery's face. The digital archives terminal in the basement records room, that's where she would go to erase those logs. Poirot, Hastings, and Peterson descended to the basement level with 2 security guards. The records room was locked but showed signs of recent entry. The electronic keypad beside the door had been partially disassembled, its wires exposed. She has bypassed the security, Poirot observed. Most ingenious. One of the guards forced the door. Inside, at a computer terminal, sat Dr. Taylor. She turned calmly at their entrance, her composure fully restored. Beside the keyboard lay a half-empty cup of water and an open pill container. "You're too late, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice oddly distant. "The records are gone, all of them, and in approximately 4 minutes, I will be beyond your questions as well." "Dr. Taylor has taken something?" Hastings exclaimed. "A carefully calculated dose," she confirmed. "Enough to ensure I won't face the humiliation of arrest and trial. I've spent my entire life building my reputation. I won't live to see it destroyed." Even as Peterson rushed to call for medical assistance, Poirot approached her with measured steps. "You killed Dr. Harris when he threatened to expose your past and your deliberate harm of Caroline Peterson." "Harris was a hypocrite," Taylor replied, a slight slur becoming noticeable in her speech. "He happily accepted the accolades and financial benefits of our arrangement for years. Only when retirement approached did his conscience suddenly trouble him. And Dr. Winters, you attacked her when she discovered Harris's notes. A regrettable necessity. I only intended to render her unconscious." Taylor's breathing had become labored, yet she maintained her clinical detachment. "She would have destroyed everything I'd worked for, as would Caroline Peterson had she been able to speak clearly after her surgery." Poirot observed, "It was not an error during her procedure, was it? You deliberately ensured she would be unable to expose your academic fraud." A ghost of a smile touched Taylor's lips. "A precisely calculated adjustment to her anesthesia. She should have simply experienced temporary aphasia, an inability to speak clearly for a few weeks. Regrettably, the effect was more severe than I had intended, and when her brother appeared at the hospital seeking answers, an inconvenience. I would have managed as I managed everything else." Her eyes were beginning to lose focus. "I've always been exceptionally thorough." Medical staff burst into the room then, rushing to administer emergency treatment. As Dr. Taylor was taken away, Poirot shook his head sadly. "The little gray cells, they comprehend the facts of this case. But the heart, it struggles to accept such calculated cruelty." Though the medical team worked feverishly, Dr. Taylor had indeed been exceptionally thorough in her final act. She survived long enough to provide a full confession, meticulously, detailing how she had administered a fatal dose of potassium chloride to Dr. Harris when he threatened to expose her past crimes at her promotion ceremony. She described hiding in his office until they were alone, then staging his death to appear as suicide. The hospital board, facing the full scandal they had tried so desperately to avoid, agreed to a comprehensive review of all cases involving Dr. Taylor and established a substantial fund for patients who might have been affected by her actions, beginning with a new settlement for Caroline Peterson that acknowledged the hospital's culpability in concealing the truth. 2 months later, as winter gave way to the first tentative signs of spring, 2 letters arrived at Poirot's London apartment. The detective was preparing for his departure to Belgium the following day, a new case having captured his interest. The first letter bore James Peterson's handwriting. He wrote of his sister's improved circumstances. The new settlement had provided for specialized care and promising new treatments. Caroline's speech therapy was showing remarkable results, and while she would never walk again, her spirits had risen considerably now that justice had finally been served. The second letter came from Dr. Elizabeth Winters, who had recovered fully and been appointed interim head of surgery at St. Catherine's. Her message was brief but touched Poirot deeply. Some secrets destroy us from within, Monsieur Poirot. Thank you for showing us that the price of silence is ultimately far higher than the price of truth. Poirot placed both letters in his desk drawer with a satisfied smile. The case had been complex, the motives tangled, but in the end the truth had prevailed, as it always must when the little gray cells were properly employed. Exactement, he murmured to himself, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror with characteristic precision. The little gray cells, they never fail. Later that evening, as he and Hastings shared a final dinner before his departure, Poirot reflected on the peculiar psychology that had driven Dr. Taylor to such extremes. She built her entire life upon deception, Hastings. Each lie required another to maintain it, until the structure became so precarious that she would resort to murder to prevent its collapse. The most dangerous criminals are often those with the most to lose, Hastings observed. Indeed. And in the end, what remains? A brilliant career destroyed, lives shattered, and a reputation in ruins. Poirot shook his head. The price of silence, my friend, is ultimately paid by everyone. Through the restaurant window, the first stars of evening appeared in the darkening sky, bearing silent witness to the eternal struggle between truth and deception, justice and expediency, that formed the landscape of Poirot's world. Tomorrow would bring new mysteries, new challenges for the little gray cells, but for tonight the detective could reflect with satisfaction on a case concluded, and justice, however belatedly, served. Thanks for joining us for The Price of Silence. Did you suspect Dr. Taylor was behind Dr. Harris's murder and Caroline's deliberate harm before Poirot revealed the full extent of her calculated crimes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this adventure with Hercule Poirot, don't forget to hit subscribe for more mysteries featuring your favorite detectives. Until next time, remember Poirot's wisdom. The truth, however, deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface when approached with order and method. This is Ailey, signing off from Café Tales.